Hey, welcome back to Curiosity Not Judgment with Gary and Birga, kicking it off with an episode 2 with Bronson Taylor. Super excited to have more conversation. If you missed the first half, you better go back and watch it from last week. But Gary, you've got some thoughts you wanted to jump in with.
Well, last week we'd covered a lot of things, and I thought that what Bronson said about AI and technology in general and how we don't like to play God, and yet everything we do is actually doing what we can make decisions on based on the current reality of the system. And if we choose to ignore parts of the system, that's not playing God. That's just putting our head in the sand and hoping for the best when there's much better alternatives out there. And I thought that was just so well said. One of the complaints about AI is going to be, everybody remembers HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you finally got to unplug it, right? And we've talked about the fears around it. One of the major, what may turn out to be a legitimate issues with AI is jobs. Mm-hmm. How do we live in a world where everything is taken over by robots and computers? And you said it yourself. There's some things like experience-based things with human touch that will never be possible to be taken over by a robot, although we could probably go farther than we're thinking right now. However, and we all know the old adage that, technologies always produce more jobs than they eliminate. Now, there's a lot of corollaries to that, like if you're willing to retrain, if you're willing to relocate, if you're willing to, change your perspective about something. Mm-hmm. But in the last couple of decades, I think we've seen where maybe automation and robots are not increasing the number of jobs. And AI certainly has the potential to kind of click over into that realm of replacing more people than it creates jobs. What are your thoughts on that study in this?
Yeah. So let me be a radical for a few minutes and go to some places that normally people don't go when they think about jobs, right? So we have this 8-hour workday, 9 to 5, give or take. You put in your years, you retire. Who made those rules? Like, why, why?
We drifted into it non-intentionally.
We drifted into it.
In the industrial age. That's right.
And it's like, thousands of years ago, they were doing it differently. Was it better? Was it worse? I don't know, but it was different. 500 years ago, they were doing it differently. Was it better? Was it worse? I don't know. In 5,000 years from now, we'll be doing it differently. Is it better? Is it worse? I don't know. But here's my point. This world we find ourselves in is as arbitrary as any other work world we could find ourselves in. I don't need to defend the 9 to 5 work schedule. I don't need to defend the fact that most people have to work most of the time. I don't buy into that. I don't think it's a true thing about the universe that most people have to work most of the time. So let's say AI does disrupt lots of jobs. Okay, maybe we don't have to have most of the population be in a workforce anyway. Maybe there's a future, and it's hard to imagine it, but maybe there's a future where you just get income, or we reinvent what a dollar means. We reinvent what money is, and we actually get to a place where needs are met. You think about Maslow's hierarchy, and basic needs can be met for the first half of the pyramid without needing to work, just because we as a society, as a population, as a global population, know how to get all basic needs met without most people working most of the time. And some people will then say, that's all I need. I just want the first half of Maslow's hierarchy. I have shelter, I have food, I actually have some extra beyond that, but I'm not ambitious and I don't want to be ambitious, and I'm just going to live. And then other people say, no, I want to be ambitious and I want the capitalism. Okay, great. There will be opportunities on top of AI to do lots of interesting things. And so here's the thing. You mentioned it. You have to retrain the population if you want the jobs to actually come with, right? Some people may not want to retrain, and they just want to subsist on something simple. Some may want to retrain, actually understand AI, and find a role in that new world. So my thought is AI might shift our paradigms beyond how do we save jobs and actually to what is a job? Are we human beings? Are we human doings? And what does work look like in 2,000 years? And are we even asking the right questions about work? Or are we just trying to hang on to something that Ford gave us when he arbitrarily decided the 8-hour workday? So I think the questions are much bigger than how do we save jobs?
It's fascinating that you bring that up. I had a meeting earlier today with a housing nonprofit, and we were talking through, the age-old studies here in America that have said home ownership is one of the biggest interrupters of generational poverty and one of the best indicators of flourishing for the future. Then we got into a conversation that really was around, well, is flourishing in 2023 the same thing as flourishing was 50 or 75 years ago when maybe some of these studies were initiated? And to your point, what is it to be content? What is it to earn a livable wage? What is, the questions are so much bigger sometimes than we can even begin to conceptualize right now.
So, absolutely. So think about this. Poor people don't have the ability to do philosophy because they're too busy trying to survive, right? Only someone, and when I say poor, I mean very poor, right? Only someone that has some basic needs being met can actually think deeply about, why am I here? What is the point of all this? What is the mean? Like, they get to go so much deeper because their basic needs are met. Until your basic needs are met, you are trying to just get food, because until you get food, all you're thinking about is food. Once you get food, you can become a philosopher, right? So it's almost like in the new world, if more people have their basic needs being taken care of, then we have to become philosophers, right? Because that's what's still uniquely human, is asking those kinds of questions. The AI will never be a philosopher. I mentioned, in the last episode that, like, having a fire, camping with your kids, or teaching them to fish, that's uniquely human. But let's go even a step further. What's uniquely human is the ability to do philosophy, right? What's uniquely human is not math. It's not English. It's not writing. It's not all the things we thought it might be, right? You think about when the calculator came out, and used to, we would teach long division like people's life depended on it. And then at some point, it's like, this calculator thing does it better. Do we really all need to know how to do long division? Because most people can't do it well. Most people can't do it accurately. Most people don't want to do it. And the answer is no, we don't need to be calculators. So we allowed calculators to take that role in our life, of being able to do long division and lots of other computations. Well, here's the thing. When ChatGPT can write better than most people can write, do we all need to still be writers? Now it's like, whoa, that was like, math is one thing, because humans always knew they weren't really calculators, but we felt like we were authors. It's like, I don't know, were we? Or was that actually just a computation of a different kind, and now this other thing can do it better? And so then it's like, well, then what's left? If calculators take over math, and now AI take over language, it's like, well, math and language feel like 100% of the pie of things that you might do with your brain. It's like, no. It's not even a fraction of what you can do with your brain. It's just that we're so stuck being human doings that we don't realize what most of our brain should be allocated toward. We should be obsessed with philosophy. We should be thinking about, why am I here? What is the point of anything? What is the right decision to make? How do we actually put AI in the right direction? We should become philosophers the more that we don't have to do the details of what AI is actually better at doing than we are anyway.
Well, but let's think about this for a moment. So I'm trying to be curious now, and not judgmental. How do we then scratch that itch of achievement? How do we make, what do I get to achieve in my life? Isn't there something to the effect of humans need to feel worthwhile and need to achieve things? If I'm gonna just get a basic, my basic needs met, what am I achieving? You're saying that that's no longer important for half the population?
It changes the definition of achievement. It doesn't change that achievement is necessary. But let me put the question back on you. You just asked me a philosophical question.
Yes.
Right? Because it's natively what you do as a human. You instantly didn't say, hey, do some long division for me, because you're not interested in it. You didn't say, write me a short story in a certain style of prose like ChatGPT does, because you weren't interested in it. That's just computation. And computation doesn't matter to you in this conversation, because conversation is not computation. In this, you want to think. And so you asked me a philosophical question, and I'm answering it with philosophical meanderings, but we're doing philosophy because it's what we do. It's what's native to us. And what AI might never do is actually think philosophically. So now let's go there. What does it mean to achieve philosophically? It's not going to be writing the best, because there's a point with Chat GPT somewhere in the future, 5.0, I don't know where we won't be able to write as well. We just won't. I mean, 4.0 is so good. It writes better than most people if you can prompt it correctly.
Already
Right?
there. Yep.
Yeah. And so it won't be that. It won't be computation, right? So what will it be? It's going to have to, you're going to have to decide what achievement is for you, right? And then this is where you have to look inwardly and everything gets really uncomfortable. As long as you stay busy 9 to 5, you don't have to ask what the meaning of your life is, and you just get to live and die, and it just is what it is. But when you don't have to work 9 to 5, or when you're forced to think philosophically, you now have to actually look in the mirror and say, why am I here? Like, what is this all about? Why am I here? And people will end up at different places. They have historically, and they will in the future, but you're going to have to wrestle with that. And here's the thing. It's not that it's a new question. It's just that AI gave you the freedom and the ability to finally ask it and answer in earnest for yourself. And your answer may be different than other people's. And now you almost have the burden of pursuing how you answer. What is achievement for you? Now you have to pursue it if that really is how you define achievement, because you're no longer a widget maker, and your worth and your achievement is no longer being defined by a CEO. Now you may have the freedom to define for yourself why you're here. And now you have the extreme burden of playing that through in reality in your own life. And that's what people have not done when they're forced to just show up, hit the time clock, work for the man, go home, be exhausted, barely survive. Now you actually get to do philosophy, and it's exciting, it's thrilling, it's scary, it's awesome.
Well, can I ask a
Please.
follow-up? So this instantly makes me think of how people might equate their talents or their passions with their value.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were to, ask a room of 50 high schoolers or 50 college students, what is your purpose? The answer might be, well, to bring art into the world, or to, create something beautiful, to do something that betters mankind. And if the notion is that AI is going to start, I'm not going to say eliminating, but maybe even doing better than we can in art, music, and some of those other categories, I could see very quickly a whole swath of humanity being incredibly disheartened, saying, well, if a computer program is going to create better than I could do, what is there in a purpose for me moving forward?
So let me push back on that. In the time of Beethoven, no one could write music like him. Does it mean that no one should write music except him?
No.
If you cannot write as well as AI, should you therefore not write? So you have to then ask yourself, why were you writing? If you were writing for a capitalistic purpose, you shouldn't write, because it's not as good, right? If you were writing because that's actually what makes your soul sing, and you've defined that as what achievement looks like for you, then you should write, no matter how terribly it is, every day of your life until you die, right? And so that's the thing, is the fact that it can do it better doesn't change how you answer the question. But now you have to answer the question for yourself, not because of what it does for the world in terms of money exchanging hands. You get to actually answer for yourself what it means. And here's the thing too, that allows so many things to come into the conversation that normally don't. Normally it's like, well, what is your value? What is your achievement? And I would say, well, I'm the founder of multiple startups. That's what I do. Well, eventually, if AI can do it better, then that answer doesn't work. It's like, well, what do you do, Bronson? Like, what do you do? And then it might be, I love. Maybe that's what I do. Maybe it's an emotion and not just a deliverable. We're so caught up in the 9 to 5 work that we think all that matters from humans are deliverables, and not emotion, not connection, not all these other philosophical concepts that might be more important than a deliverable.
Listen, I know I'm going to have to be retrained then, Bronson, because, I've been pretty successful at hiding behind, my work as my value, my achievements, as my worth. And I'm going to now have to be retrained to get a vision for my life in different ways. And so can we, as a society, for once, get it right, and because that's a judgment that we haven't done it right in the past. Can we retrain ourselves and everybody else, especially the people who feel left behind? And there's always a large number of people who feel left behind, and it's legitimate because they feel that way. So how can we bring everybody forward using this? And I would love a world where we're thinking about philosophy, where I'm thinking about in 5 years, where do I want to be? Who do I want to be? Not what job do I do, but who do I want to be? And what relationships do I want? And what's most important to me? We all want that, but who has time for that these days, right? Don't you think some retraining needs to be done?
Absolutely. Here's what's really interesting. It's the opposite group that have to be retrained from the previous revolutions. So you think about the software revolution, you and I won, Gary, right? We had the brain for it. We had the brain for it. We had the ambition for it. But what were we doing? We were just playing the role of computer. Like we were computing, we were doing. And so when AI disrupts things, it's not disrupting the people that already understood they were human beings and not human doings. It's disrupting the people that thought they were human doings. It's disrupting me and you, Gary. It's not disrupting the people that already are balanced and already have understood what the purpose is. And so here's the thing. You and I have to relearn that deliverables are not our worth, right? But there's going to be a large swath of people that say, finally, you guys are done thinking that what you do at work is actually the most important thing you do in a day. And you realize that there's more to this life than how many donuts you can make in a given day, right? So I do think there's a retraining. I think it's the opposite group that has to be retrained, though. And so here's the thing. I think that it's one of those things. It's what I would tell people in any revolution. It's going to work itself out because it has to, right? It's like, you may not have liked that there was a Model T Ford, and you may have wanted just faster buggies. That's fine. The world's moving on, whether you like it or not. I mean, it's just at some point you're going to have to retrain your brain, and I'm gonna have to retrain my brain to really, what does it mean to be a human? And what does it mean to live in this world where AI does so many jobs and does them so well? And we're going to be forced to do that. But here's what's interesting. The second we start exploring it, we might fall in love with what it means to be a human. It may not be this terrible thing. It may be, I'll give you an example. Last week, I turned 40 years old. So, family said, thank you. They said, what do you want for your 40th? I said, I want to go and be in a cabin in the woods. That's it. Right. So me and my wife went to a cabin in the woods. And while we're there, it wasn't that hard to forget about work. Right. Like it comes pretty naturally. Actually, you're looking at these trees and you're walking these paths and you're doing things that humans have been doing for millennia. And you realize that it's not that hard to connect with being a human again. And that what's actually hard is coming back today and saying, okay, what's the schedule? All right, I got a podcast at this time. I got this meeting at this time. Like what's unnatural is the world we find ourselves in that we're afraid to leave. What's natural is what we're going toward. So I don't think the retraining has to be that difficult. I think we might fall into it somewhat naturally.
That's really good.
Well, it gives me many, many more things and rabbit trails to go down and to think through. But I made me a little bit excited. I felt like, hey, I'm up next because you guys, with the software brains and the tech brains, like I don't have any of that. But man, if I could get paid for loving people well, I'm ready for it.
Well, and we have things that track everything that we do. I track my sleep religiously. I track my exercise. I track my heart rate, my respiration rate. You know what? I can track my activities, and maybe in the future, there's a way to think about not getting reimbursed so much as understanding the true value of being a caregiver, for instance, which is not paid at this point, or et cetera. And without getting into the, hey, you shouldn't be paid for things you should do as a family member or a member of society. The point is, we can all be doing very worthwhile things and still not worry about that. Oh, am I getting paid for it or not? We can all go volunteer at the soup kitchen. We can all go down to the homeless shelter and help someone come up with a vision. Those are the kinds of things that we could do if that kind of thing happens.
Absolutely. The greatest people in history divorced their activity from its monetary value. The people we study did not do things because it was lucrative. They did things because they had to, because they decided what their purpose was and they followed it through fully. And that's whether we're talking about Gandhi, Jesus, Mother Teresa, Malcolm, like whoever you put in there, Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, they didn't do things because it made sense on the P&L, because it didn't make sense on the P&L. They did it because they had to do it. So I think they were ahead of the curve, and the people of the future that make sense to me are the ones that divorce monetary value from activity. And they do things because they were driven to do them by a force they can't really define.
Well, bring us to a conclusion for this particular episode and give us some curious things that we can be thinking of about how do we reshape our construct, our whole notion of, that 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, human doing versus human being. What are some good questions we can start to ask ourselves?
Yeah. So one, I'll walk you through some questions that I've asked myself over the last decade, right? As I've gotten to some of these, weird points of view. You go in at, 9 to 5, but some of that time is spent around the water cooler. Some of that time is just eating lunch. Some of that time is just goofing off. Some of that time is scrolling on social media. So start asking yourself, how much time do I really need to do my job? Like, that's just a start. And just be honest with yourself, because we all inflate these numbers because we want to say, I'm so valuable, please don't fire me. But just be honest, like, does it really take 8 hours? Could you do it in 2? Could you do it in 2 solid hours? And if so, can you start redeeming back some of that time? Can you start having honest conversations? If you're self-employed, honest conversations with yourself. If you're employed by somebody else, honest conversations with your boss. Can you start saying, hey, I actually looked at, how we allocate time in our company here. My division or my team, I think we can do all our work in 4 days. Can you let us have some 4-day weeks for a month and see if the productivity goes down? What if 3-day weekends were just the norm for this team for 1 month? Let us try it out. Start broaching questions and asking things that you've been afraid to ask. People are so desperate to look valuable that they inflate how much work they actually do. So I'll give you an example. My job as the CEO of one of the companies I'm currently the CEO over, and it's a large operation, giant worldwide. There's we have over 800 independent consultants that look to us for training materials, for guidance. We do a lot of their payroll. We do a lot of stuff with them. We have a large team. There's software development. There's R&D. There's just a lot going on. My goal is not to look busy. My goal is to be able to disappear and nothing change, right? Because that means I set up the systems and processes that were necessary to not be a part of everything all the time. Some people look at me and they think, is Bronson lazy? Some people look at me and think, how did he do that? Like, how did he put all that together? And it's because I'm not trying to look busy, right? I'm trying to actually build a good company. I'm not trying to work 9 to 5. Like, it's irrelevant to me how long something takes. And so if I can knock off in the middle of the day and go fishing, great. If I need to put in some long hours, that's fine too. But I've gotten past the point of playing the game of needing to look busy for the people that are either shareholders, bosses, colleagues. I don't need to look busy anymore. So I would say that's a starting point, is just look at yourself, look at your time, and ask yourself, can you stop playing the game of trying to look busy? And now, what does it really take to get your job done? Can you redeem back some time and start putting it in some areas that maybe really matter to you, but aren't that lucrative? So I think that's a starting point.
I think that's awesome. Bronson, really appreciate your time. I want to point people to your website if they want to learn more about you, dumbpunk.com, dumbpunk.com. Really excited to, think through some of these deep things. And I hope we can become friends now. And I'll borrow you from Gary.
Sounds great.
Thanks
Awesome
again,
conversation.
Bronson. Take care.
Thank you, Gary.
All right. So as always, check in with the website, curiosity, not judgment.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.